Hello, my name is Margaret Whitmore. When my son got married, I thought it would be the happiest day of my life. Instead, I was seated at the far corner, hidden behind flowers, treated as though I didn't exist. No one knew that while I stayed silent, I carried a secret one my late husband entrusted to me worth $53 million. This is not just about money. It's about dignity, betrayal, and finding the courage to stand tall when even your own family wants to erase you. They seated me at table 14, hidden behind an arrangement of roses so tall I could barely see my own son walk down the aisle. The stems rose like a barricade, petals glowing under the chandeliers. I leaned left, then right, but the blossoms kept me hemmed in. Beyond them, the wedding march rose, and I caught only fragments, lace tuxedo shoulders, the back of Mike's head, as he followed Lauren into her shining moment. The perfume of roses was thick, almost suffocating. In the haze, I saw Edward's plaid shirt folded on the kitchen chair the morning he died. He had once told me that silence was armor, weightless but strong. I held on to that as I sat cloaked in shadows. The ballroom shimmered like a stage light, pooling across marble floors. Guests in silk and suits lifted glasses. Photographers aimed lenses, and the head table glittered at the center. I, mother of the groom, was blurred to the edge, as if this day could proceed more perfectly without me in the picture at all. The usher who'd guided me here carried the certainty of a clerk filing papers. Table 14, Ms. Whitmore, he'd said, as though the number defined my role. He pulled the chair only halfway, never offering me a better view. When I tried to adjust the towering vase, reclaim the space enforcing the message, remain hidden. Vows echoed, faintly muffled by petals. Applause rose like a tide, but I clapped into silence unseen. My heart ached with the urge to stand to claim my son with a glance, yet Edward's words steadied me. Armor, not outburst. Evelyn slid beside me, her perfume sharp, her smile tilted like a spotlight angled away. She spoke toward another guest, but her words were pitched. For me, Lauren has elevated Mike in ways he never could alone. Our family has given him opportunity. Her hand grazed mine in false reassurance. It landed as possession. I held still. Fury sealed tight is more powerful than fury loosed. Evelyn didn't need my reply. She only needed me to hear. That was victory enough for her. Later, when family photographs were called, I smoothed my dress and followed a small hope kindling that at least in those frozen moments I might stand beside my son. Families clustered on the marble staircase, golden light washing down. I placed myself near Mike, searching for his eyes. But Lauren's hand slid across his arm, steering. She turned her body veil like a curtain, and the camera caught her radiant profile while I became a blurred edge cropped out by her practiced angle. Flashes fired. Evelyn clapped approval at the results. My son laughed obligingly. No one called me back when the next sequence began. I stood adrift, a shadow among sequins, before retreating to my table. It was then under chandeliers and clicking shutters that the truth landed cold and sharp. This was not oversight. It was design. My role as his mother had been deliberately erased, concealed behind flowers, smiles, and choreography so polished it could pass for accident to anyone else. But I knew better. I had learned to read the shape of silence. I laid my palms flat against the linen, breathing slowly. If they wished me invisible, they had succeeded partly, but not entirely. I whispered to myself, they believe I am invisible. But Edward left me something they don't know. Back home, I opened the oak box. Edward left me the only place I trusted more than people. The lid creaked softly, releasing the faint smell of cedar and the trace of Edward's cologne that had lingered for years. My fingers brushed the edge of envelopes, stacked with neat precision, every corner squared, as if he had known I would need order when chaos pressed in. The weight of the wood was grounding heavy enough to remind me that something in my life remained unshakable. The living room was dim, only the lamp beside Edward's chair casting a circle of gold on the rug. Outside, Portland's spring rain ticked against the window, a rhythm both soothing and relentless. I drew the box closer, slid free the first envelope, and there it was, the green binder sealed with crimson wax. I traced the emblem with my thumb, the hardened seal catching the light like a quiet flame. It felt less like an accessory and more like armor. Inside the binder, Edward's handwriting greeted me first. His letter, addressed simply, "For Margaret," carried the calm authority he'd always had when steering me through storms. "Your armor is not bragging. It's paperwork," he had written. "People will argue words. Documents speak for you when you no longer can." I pressed the page to my chest, closing my eyes for a beat as if I could hear his voice in the air. Behind the letter lay the documents he had assembled long before the stroke. A living trust, meticulously notarized listing assets that startled me even after years of marriage. Properties, investments, accounts all totaling more than $53 million. But more striking than the figure were the protections woven through every clause. Successor trustees chosen with care, no contest provisions, HIPAA releases, granting control of his medical information only to me. It was Edward's way of saying he knew storms would come, and he refused to let me stand without shelter. I turned the pages slowly, each paragraph tightening the knot of resolve inside me. There was no loophole left for anyone to claim ignorance. He had anticipated manipulation, perhaps even betrayal, and had written the defenses into law. The green binder was not just a record of wealth. It was a shield crafted in ink and foresight. A tremor ran through me as I realized the depth of his preparation. He had not underestimated the people who might circle like crows after his death. He had seen their shadows before I did, and in his silence he had prepared the antidote. The key was mine alone, literal and figurative. I slid the documents back carefully, pressed the wax seal flat again, and returned the binder to its place at the center of the oak box. I sat back in Edward's chair, the plaid shirt he had left behind folded neatly over the armrest. My hand rested on the fabric, a bridge between past and present. I felt less invisible than I had at table 14. Here, with his words and his foresight spread before me, I felt seen, defended, even accompanied. The rain outside thickened, drumming harder against the window. The clock marked past midnight. I closed the lid of the oak box, knowing I could face whatever performance Lauren and Evelyn staged next. They could speak louder, but my silence had been armed. Just as I leaned back, the phone on the side table lit up and began to buzz. Lauren's name glowed across the screen, sharp as a spotlight in the dark. Her phone rings. It's Lauren requesting a family meeting. Lauren didn't come alone. She brought Thomas Blake, her lawyer, and a stack of papers thick enough to choke me. The cafe was nearly empty, the morning light cutting sharp through glass windows and scattering across the polished tables. I had chosen a corner seat where I could see the street, hoping perhaps this would be a conversation over lattes and apologies. Instead, Lauren arrived in heels that announced themselves with each click, her smile polished and brittle, and at her side, a man whose briefcase looked like it could swallow lives whole. Lauren leaned in her tone, syrupy sweet. "It's just for your safety, Mom," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. She smoothed her skirt, eyes flashing as though the words themselves were a costume she was tired of wearing. Thomas set the papers between us with clinical precision. The top page bore the heading in heavy font, Power of Attorney. His pen tapped once, twice before he folded his hands and let the silence swell. I kept mine. Silence is an answer, too. Lauren tilted her head, letting a strand of hair fall just so her voice pitched higher, softer. We've all been worried. Evelyn thought it best that we secure things now before anything happens. You know, just in case. She pushed the paper an inch closer, her fingernails gleaming like claws disguised in polish. I didn't move. My eyes traveled down the text columns of clauses that bled with finality. If I signed, every choice would pass from my hands into theirs. A tidy, gift-wrapped erasure. Thomas adjusted his tie, his expression unreadable. "This is standard, Ms. Whitmore," he said flatly. "Given your circumstances, this will avoid confusion later." He left the words hanging, designed to bruise. My bag sat beside me, the weight of the green binder pressing against the leather like a reminder. Edward's seal, the words in his letter. "Your armor is not bragging, it's paperwork," anchored me. I folded my hands neatly on the table, mirroring Thomas's composure. Lauren's voice dropped its honey. "It would mean a lot to Mike if you did this willingly. You don't want to make him worry, do you?" Her phrasing was careful, but impatience pulsed beneath it, seeping through the cracks of her practiced performance. She tapped the edge of the paper harder than she meant to the sound, sharp against the glass tabletop. I let the silence stretch until the clatter of cups and hiss of the espresso machine filled the space. Then I said evenly, "I'll let Richard review this before I touch a pen." Lauren blinked. Once, then twice. The mask faltered. Thomas's jaw flexed, but he said nothing. Lauren's smile cracked into something thinner, sharper. "Mike will be so disappointed if you refuse to cooperate." Richard Carter turned the pages one by one, shaking his head. "This isn't protection. It's shackles." The stack of papers Lauren and Thomas had pressed across the cafe table now lay under the scrutiny of a man who had known Edward almost as long as I had. Richard's office smelled of pine and paper, the wood-paneled walls lined with rows of binders that looked less like legal texts and more like shields waiting for battle. Afternoon light filtered through half-drawn blinds, striping his desk in pale gold. I sat across from him, the leather of the chair stiff beneath my hands. My bag rested at my feet, the green binder tucked inside its weight, a steady reminder that Edward's foresight was still with me. Richard tapped a finger against the clause Thomas had highlighted. "If you had signed this," he said, voice low but firm, "you would have handed them the right to control your money, your medical decisions, even your home. You'd be a guest in your own life. Do you see how neatly this is written? They made it look like a gift, but it's a lock, and you'd be the one turning the key against yourself." I nodded, my throat tight. The cafe replayed in my mind Lauren's false concern, Thomas's predatory calm, and the way their voices had pressed me toward compliance. Edward's words. Paperwork is armor had stopped my hand then. And now Richard's voice confirmed the trap. I didn't sign, I said, and my words steadied as I added, "I told them I'd let you review it first." Richard's gaze softened for the briefest second. He set the POA aside as though it carried contamination. "Good. Because what you already have, what Edward left you, is stronger than anything they've tried to slip in front of you." I reached into the bag and placed the green binder on his desk. The wax seal caught the light, its red stamp like a heartbeat. Richard's hands, practiced and careful, opened it with reverence. He read Edward's letter first, lips tightening into a faint line of respect. Then he turned to the trust documents, scanning each provision with the attention of a craftsman examining fine steel. When he spoke again, there was steel in his tone. Edward built this to withstand every storm. The trust is ironclad. The HIPAA released the successor clauses, the no contest provision. It's all here. They can't touch what's yours unless you open the door, and from the look of it, Edward nailed that door shut years ago. A knot I hadn't realized I was carrying loosened in my chest. The ballroom humiliation, the photographs where I'd been cropped away, Lauren's polished threat, all of it pressed against me less sharply in this room. Here, with Richard's certainty, I felt the faint shape of defense forming. Richard pulled a stamp from his drawer, dipped it into ink, and pressed it down on the no contest clause. The red mark bloomed across the page like a seal of finality. The sound of it echoed in the quiet room, a small thunderclap of reassurance. He slid the binder back toward me, his eyes steady on mine. The next time they come, you'll have more than silence, you'll have proof. The email's subject line froze me. Beneficiary change request denied. The glow of my laptop cut through the dark living room, the lamplight at my side buzzing faintly. I stared at the subject line until the word denied blurred its weight heavier, because it meant someone had tried and failed. I clicked. The bank's message was brisk, almost clinical. A request had been submitted to alter the beneficiary of my account. The system rejected it under the trust's restrictions. The reference number glared like evidence waiting to be claimed. My breath slowed as I dialed the bank. A recorded voice, then a representative, polite but brisk. I gave my name, spelled the number. Silence on the line, followed by a shuffle of papers. Then, "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore." "I see the request. It was submitted by Thomas Blake. He said he was acting on behalf of your family." Heat crawled up my neck. Was there documentation? Only his firm's letterhead. No power of attorney. Our controls rejected it. She softened. "Do you want a copy?" "Yes." I said, my voice steadier than my pulse. The email arrived before I set the phone down. I opened the attachment. There it was in black and white, his name, his request. The stamp across it denied. Not speculation, not rumor. Proof. I printed the email, the pages sliding out, warm, sharp with the scent of ink. The sound steadied me. Paper had weight. Paper had temperature. Paper told the truth, even when people lied. A knock rattled the porch railing. When I opened the door, Helen stood there, cheeks pink from the night air. "Lights were on," she said. "You looked shaken." I led her to the table. She bent over the laptop, reading aloud. "They already tried to change it." Her tone made it a verdict. "I confirmed with the bank," I said. "Thomas filed it for Lauren." Speaking their names made the house feel smaller. Helen, straightened eyes fierce. "You cannot fight this alone. They want you silent. That's their weather. Don't give it to them." "Silence is still mine," I answered softly. "But it can hold paper." Her laugh was short and fierce. "Then stack it." I slid the fresh pages into a clear sleeve, opened the green binder, and snapped the rings. The sound echoed through the quiet room. The denial email, the request form, and Helen's note went into place. She had insisted on signing as witness her neat script beneath the date and reference number. My binder had grown teeth. For a moment we sat without speaking. The lamp buzzed, the computer dimmed, the street beyond went still. I ran my finger across the red seal inside the cover. "Edward had left me armor." Now I was beginning to wield it. Helen touched my shoulder. You did right. And you're not crazy. I know I said surprised at how calm I sounded, but I needed the paper to say it back. I made a duplicate copy, sliding it into a second folder. Edward had always believed in pairs, one in the open, one locked away. The small rituals steadied me. Then came a sound on the porch, measured footsteps, hesitant, as though each board carried a question. I pressed the binder to my chest for a breath, then set it back on the table. The doorbell rings. Mike stands outside, hesitation written across his face. My son stood on my porch, coffee cup, trembling in his hands, as if my silence weighed more than any verdict. Morning light traced thin lines across the railing. A cool Portland breeze stirred the chimes once before falling still. Mike looked worn, his jacket too light for the air. He kept his eyes anywhere but on me, at the hedge, the mailbox, the empty street. "Lauren just wants you safe," he said. Voice too soft, too rehearsed. "She thinks the paperwork. It would make things easier. For everyone. For whom I asked. For you. For me. In an emergency." "The emergency seems to be their patience," I said. The breeze lifted again, and I opened the door. "Come inside. I have something to show you." He followed reluctantly, glancing around, as if entering hostile ground. At the kitchen table, I slid the printed bank email toward him, the denial notice, the request form beneath Thomas's name in plain text. Mike read, stopped, skimmed again. Color drained from his face. "What is this, a request to change my beneficiary?" I said. "Submitted by Thomas. For Lauren." He set his cup down, too hard, coffee sloshing. "She wouldn't. There has to be some mistake." "The bank confirmed it," I said. "No power of attorney? Just a letterhead." "They tried Mike." He rubbed the bridge of his nose, the old nervous tell. "I'll ask her. There's probably context. Context like the cafe, the stack of papers for my safety, or the photographs where I was cropped out." He winced. That was the planner. "Planners don't delete mothers by accident," I said, "and lawyers don't move without instruction." Read the name again. He did slower this time. The clock ticked between us. "I don't know what you want me to do," he said finally. "Lauren's under stress." "The wedding, the move, I worked 40 years under stress," I said, steady. I didn't reach into other people's accounts. He looked up, then eyes wide, boyish with shame. I leaned closer. "What do you believe, Mike?" He faltered. "I believe she wants what's best. She says widows get targeted. She says if you're confused," a laugh escaped me sharp. "Confused about numbers. About columns I've balanced my whole life." He flinched. "I want peace. Peace without respect is theater," I said quietly. "And you don't get it by making me smaller." He reached for the pages, then pulled back as if they burned. "If I show her this, she'll say you misread it. She'll say Thomas jumped the gun. She can say anything." I replied. "The paper speaks for itself. Will you take it to her?" The silence stretched taut as wire. He weighed storms at home against truth in his hand. His fingers trembled. The cup lid tapped twice against the table. "Don't make me choose," he whispered. "You already are," I said. "Every day you say nothing." He stared at me, wounded. "I'm trying to keep things from exploding. By staying silent, you are not with me. You are with them." The truth landed. He stood abruptly, chair scraping. For a second, I thought he might apologize, reach for the proof. Instead, he shook his head, eyes shining. "I have to go," he murmured. "I'll talk to her." He left without looking back. Mike leaves without answering his footsteps, heavy on the wooden stairs. The bank manager laid the denied form on the desk, a red denied stamp screaming louder than any sermon. The private meeting room was quiet, afternoon light filtering through frosted glass. Helen sat beside me, her cardigan bunched at her elbows, watching every move. My green binder rested in my bag, waiting. The manager adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for coming. This is the request our system rejected." I leaned forward. The header was clear advisory portal submission. The name even clearer, Thomas Blake. Beneath his justification, acting to ensure the customer's safety. The line for a new beneficiary remained blank, the refusal written in bold red letters across it. "Was he acting for someone else?" I asked. "Yes," the manager said. "He indicated he represented your daughter-in-law, Lauren. No valid power of attorney was attached. Under the trust's terms, this could not be processed." Helen's voice cut sharp. "So not just inappropriate, impossible. And you'll confirm that in writing." He nodded, sliding a second page across the desk, the formal notice of rejection, citing Edwards' clauses line by line. "Your husband designed these protections well. Nothing can move without your in-person authorization. Paper as armor." Edwards' foresight hummed through every line. "May I see the original?" I asked. He turned the form toward me. At the bottom, Thomas's signature in neat ink fibers of the page, faintly blurred where the pen pressed down. "Proof." Helen leaned closer, jaw tight. "We'll need copies." Without protest, the manager rose, fed the pages through the copier, and returned with warm paper that smelled faintly of heat. He stamped each copy, received, dated, initialed. The sound of the stamp echoed in the silence like a gavel. He placed them before me. "For your records." "Do you log account access?" I asked. "Yes." The entry came from Mr. Blake's firm credentials. "Your attorney can request the trail." I nodded. "He will." Helen touched my sleeve. "Initial each page, then mark the reference number." My pen moved with steady strokes, stitching my initials onto the corner of every sheet. I slid the copies into a fresh sleeve in the binder. The rings snapped shut, their sound like a lock turning. The manager studied me with the weary eyes of someone who had seen families crumble over ledgers. "I'm sorry you're facing this." "I'm not alone," I said. Helen's presence made that true. She pressed further. "Please confirm aloud the request came from Thomas Blake acting for Lauren." "Confirm," the manager said. "And under your trust it was impossible to approve." Helen nodded. "That's all we need." I lifted one page again, letting the red stamp catch the light. Warm under my hand, the signature at the bottom pinned everything to reality. I had entered this room with suspicion. I was leaving with proof. "Will Mr. Blake be notified?" I asked. "Our system has already sent an automated denial," he said. "He may follow up. If he contacts you, direct him to counsel. Do not engage." "I won't," I said. "The paper speaks for itself." We stood. Helen shook his hand briskly. "Clarity saves time," she told him. He escorted us to the hall, then paused. His eyes flicked both ways before he leaned closer. Voice dropping to a whisper, meant only for me. The manager whispers, "They won't stop here, Mrs. Whitmore." The wedding album arrived, but in every frame my face was hidden by flowers, shoulders, or deliberate shadows. The box was heavier than I expected, thick pages sealed in glossy sleeves. Afternoon light slid across my living room as I set the album on the coffee table, the spine cracking faintly with its first opening. At first glance, the photos glittered chandeliers, white gowns, rows of smiling faces. But as I turned each page, a hollow ache spread through me. There I was, or rather there I wasn't. my hat eclipsed by roses, my body obscured by a guest's shoulder, my profile cut off by shadow. Each frame positioned me out of sight, as if I had been seated behind the camera rather than in the room. Helen, who had stopped by with tea, leaned closer, her brow furrowing. "That's strange," she murmured. She flipped back a page. "There, your son's first dance. You were at that table. Where are you?" I pointed to the blur of flowers crowding the lower corner. "Behind this bouquet." She turned another page. "And here the cake cutting. Your chair's empty." "I was there," I said quietly. "I remember the frosting sticking to the knife. But here, I might as well be invisible." Helen pressed her lips tight. "This can't be coincidence." I closed the album for a moment, letting the silence breathe. The glossy cover reflected the lamplight polished false. My phone chimed an email from the photographer. My hands trembled as I opened it. Per Lauren's instructions, it read, "We adjusted the layout for aesthetics." "Hope you're pleased." Helen gasped. "Instructions." She approved this. The words blurred but sharpened in meaning. Not accident, not oversight, but intent. I forwarded the message to myself, saving copies to 2 folders, then printed it while Helen watched. The machine's hum sounded like a witness. Back at the table, I took scissors from the drawer. Helen's hand hovered. "What are you doing?" I opened the album to one page, the family portrait, where everyone beamed beneath chandeliers, while I stood tucked at the edge, my face swallowed by shadow. With one steady motion, I cut along the margin, lifting the piece free. "If they erase me from pictures," I said, sliding the fragment into a plastic sleeve, "I will carve myself into the truth." The snip of the scissors was final, irreversible. I pressed the sleeve into the green binder, the rings snapping shut. Helen touched my arm. "They can try to erase you, Margaret, but the paper doesn't lie." The album lay open, its pages incomplete, now scarred by my cut. But the binder grew heavier, stronger with each edition. Then my phone buzzed again. A new message, family dinner. Friday, 7 p.m. We need to talk. Lauren. My stomach turned. Dinner wasn't an invitation. It was a stage. If you've felt the sting of being erased, don't miss what comes next. Hit subscribe so you'll be here when silence finally turns into proof. I spoke in the small church hall, my voice steady, as Ruth, Bernice, and Althea leaned forward like jurors. Afternoon light cut through high windows, laying pale ladders across the scuffed floor. Folding chairs squeaked a coffee urn, hissed at the back, and the air smelled of cake and old hymnals. Helen sat beside me, her calm presence anchoring my words. I told them about Table 14, where roses hid me from my son, about the cafe and the safety forms, about the bank's email. The bold red denied stamped over Thomas's attempt for Lauren, about the album where my face was shadows and flowers, each detail stacked like bricks, and with everyone their eyes sharpened. Ruth tugged at her scarf. "They put me behind a column at my daughter's wedding," she said. "Said it was symmetry. I learned later. Symmetry meant hiding me." Bernice rubbed the gold ring on her finger. "After Charlie died, my nephew waved papers at me. Said widows get scammed. I told him the worst scammer is the one who says, 'Trust me,' and brings a pen." Althea opened her little notebook, neat as scripture. "Write it all, names, dates, words. Paper invites memory to testify." Helen nudged me, and I went on Richard's red seal, the bank manager's stamp, the binder I now filled, like a soldier stocking armor. "They call it care," I said. Bernice's laugh was dry. "Care that needs a signature isn't care, it's custody." Althea lifted her head. Who else knows Richard, the bank manager, the photographer? And now you. They exchanged a glance. The quiet language of women who have stood in kitchens after funerals and decided how to keep the world together. Ruth leaned closer. If they challenge you, we will stand beside you. Bernice added the words that struck like iron paper. Isn't paranoia. It's prudence. The lines steadied me. For the first time in weeks, my story felt less like solitude and more like testimony. Helen summarized briskly. She has the denial, the signature, the email. What she needs is witnesses. Althea flipped to a fresh page. We can sign statements. Dates, times, what we saw. Ruth tapped the table. And when the cameras come, we'll be in the frame with you. I pulled the binder from my bag. Even closed it seemed to weight the table. I slid the photographer's email to them. They read per Lauren's instructions and drew sharp breaths. One by one, they signed beneath noting the hall and the time. We did the same for the bank denial. The paper warmed beneath our pens, alive with witness. Friday. Lauren has called for a family dinner, I said. It feels less like an invitation than a summons. Ruth gave me a wry smile. Then bring dessert and a boundary. Bernice scribbled her number, twice tore the page in half. If voices rise, call. Put us on speaker. Invisible witnesses still count. Althea tucked her pen behind her ear. If they rush to court, you'll see us there too. Handbags full of statements. I laughed, startled by the sound of it. Gratitude pressed against my ribs. Thank you. I said the words small for the weight they carried. We tidied the hall because that's what church women do when they've decided something: stacked cups, folded chairs, wiped crumbs. Normal order as proof against chaos. I logged the moment, May 20th. Church hall circle of witnesses formed. When the binder shut, its click sounded like a door locking. We stepped into the corridor where the air smelled faintly of polish and dust. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Richard's name glowing on the screen. His voice came stripped of pleasantries. Richard calls Lauren and Thomas filed for emergency guardianship. They sat in my living room, Lauren with her sharpened smile, Thomas with his briefcase, and Mike with silence, heavy as stone. Rain slicked the windows, drumming steady on the sill. The lamp lit only the coffee table. The rest of the room breathed in shadows. Mike's eyes stayed down, fixed on his damp jacket cuffs. Lauren crossed her legs with ceremony heels swinging like a metronome. Thomas opened his case and spread papers with the practiced calm of a conjurer. Let's keep this simple, Lauren began, voice bright. An updated power of attorney, a clean directive, nothing dramatic. Safety, Margaret. We sign tonight and everyone sleeps easier. Everyone I asked. She smiled wider. You, Mike, and me because I care about this family. Thomas slid a stack forward. Durable POA financial medical. All standard. You'll still feel in control. This just streamlines decisions. Streamlines for whom? For all of us, Lauren said. Fraud is rampant. We should notarize tomorrow. Mike's grip whitened on the chair arm, but he said nothing. I set the green binder on the table. The rings clicked open. I slid out the stamped bank denial and placed it beside their papers. This governs my life, not you. Thomas's jaw tightened. That email was a misunderstanding. The bank manager initialed every page I replied, and the portal entry traced to your firm. Lauren leaned forward, tone coaxing. Margaret, this isn't adversarial. We're preventing confusion. About numbers, I asked, or about authority. She softened her voice. I know the wedding photos hurt you, but this is different. This is love. Love isn't a form that moves money, I said. Thomas tapped the page. We can add limits, carve-outs. Not here, I said, evenly. Nothing is updated in my living room. Mike finally spoke, his voice brittle. Mom? Maybe just the medical one for emergencies. There already is one, I told him gently. Springing. 2 physicians. Your name is on it. He blinked, startled, then looked away. Lauren's heel stilled. We can solve that. One durable document, it will make your life easier. It will make my life smaller, I said, and yours larger. Thomas exhaled through his nose. Courts don't like chaos. If you refuse reasonable steps, judges notice. The only judge that matters are the one who reads, I said, resting my hand on the binder. His name is Richard Carter. Lauren's gaze searched the room, hunting for weakness. Margaret, I'm asking for trust. Trust is earned. Authority is documented. You have neither. Thomas tried again. Sign now and we'll review next week. You can revoke any time. Revocation is the apology of bad paperwork, I said. Prevention is better. I let the photographer's email flash under the lamp per Lauren's instructions long enough for her eyes to flicker. Then I shut the binder with a decisive click. Lauren's smile cooled. Are you refusing to cooperate? I am refusing to surrender. From now on, everything goes through Richard. Not you. Not ever. The room stilled with the weight of rain outside. Thomas gathered his papers more slowly now. Mike's throat worked words trapped behind his silence. Lauren's smile held, then cracked at the edge. She stood smoothing her skirt. Then we're done here. Her voice had lost its satin. She paused at the door and threw one last shard back at me. Lauren's smile breaks. Then we'll make it public. Sunday. You'll regret this. Richard set a heavy file on his desk and said, without hesitation, they will drag you into the open, but we will drag the truth in with you. The morning light streamed through the blinds in measured bars falling across Richard's desk. The green binder I had carried pressed close against my ribs. His office smelled of paper and pine polish, the kind of steady fragrance that never shifted with seasons. He wore a dark suit that seemed carved from the same discipline that lined his voice. He opened the file and spread the papers toward me. At the top, emergency guardianship petition. Thomas Blake's name appeared with the authority of print, claiming I was confused, vulnerable, susceptible to influence. Every sentence carried the venom of erasure, as though I were already gone. They've written a play, Richard said evenly. Our task is to show the court their script is fiction. He pulled a yellow pad and scrawled in block letters, Evidence Log Official. You've kept records, he reminded me. Now we crown them with dates and stamps. So I began to recite May 14th, the cafe meeting where Thomas slid the POA across the table. May 16th, the bank's denial email stamped and confirmed. May 18th, the photographer's message per Lauren's instructions approving a layout that cut me out of frame. May 20th, the church hall gathering. Ruth Bernice and Althea signing their statements. Richard's pen moved quickly, anchoring each fact with precision. When he finished, he reached for the red stamp, pressed it to the bottom of the page, and lifted a sun of ink. Not paranoia, he said, prudence. He turned back to their exhibits. Here, he muttered, sliding them across a vague note from a pastor, a neighbor's hearsay, a flimsy article about elder scams. His jaw tightened. Smoke and mirrors. But notice what they lack. He tapped the empty corner of the page. Medical evidence. From a separate folder, he drew a letter. The weight of the paper was heavier than it looked, embossed with my physician's seal. His voice sharpened as he read patient demonstrates capacity to manage financial and medical affairs independently. He laid down another document beside it, the HIPAA release I had signed weeks earlier, authorizing him to carry and present the truth. The fortress I had built from silence suddenly felt like a fortress of stone. "They'll say you coached this," I said. "They can," he replied. "But a signature from a licensed physician is not a stage prop. It stands where rumors collapse." He slid both documents into the binder as though sheathing blades. He outlined the plan with a soldier's clarity copies of each exhibit, mailed certified receipts logged. A one-page statement in my own voice, free of adjectives, only facts. If they shout, you remain calm. If they call you confused, you read. If they accuse you of obstruction, you produce the bank denial. If they claim unsafe, you hold this letter. His finger tapped the physician's name again, and the sound was like a gavel. "Mike may falter," I admitted. Richard leaned back. "Then let him. Wavering suns find their ground when the truth is too heavy to deny. What matters is that you hand the judge bedrock, not noise." He gathered the papers, squared their corners, and pressed them into the green binder. The metal rings clicked shut with a finality that rang like steel locking into place. He looked at me over the closed book. "Say it," he instructed. I met his gaze. "On Sunday, when they strike, we'll strike back with proof." For the first time that morning, a smile reached the corners of his mouth. He pulled out the red stamp once more, pressed it hard, and slid the binder back into my hands. He places the letter and HIPAA release into the binder. "This is your shield and sword." Mike's voice cracked in the church side room. "I don't know whose side I'm on anymore." The choir's warm-up seeped through plaster-muffled scales rising and falling. The radiator ticked under the window rain, streaking the glass. Mike stood by the coat rack, hands trembling worse than they had on my porch. His eyes darted as though the walls themselves demanded an answer. "She says I have to choose," he blurted. "She says marriage means unity, no secrets, no defiance. She says Richard is manipulating you, that you're proud, confused, ruining everything." His voice cracked again, thin as paper. I breathed slow. The binder wasn't with me, but its weight lived in my palm. "And what do you say?" His mouth worked, then failed. The choir shifted into harmony. "I say I want peace. I can't wake to argument and sleep to argument. I'm drowning between two people who both believe they're right." "You're not between us," I said quietly. "You're inside your own choice." He flinched, shoulders folding. "She says, if I don't stand with her on Sunday, she'll—" He cut himself off. "It matters," Helen said gently from her chair near the file cabinet. "When threats frame the doorway, every step bruises." Mike rubbed his face. "I can't betray my wife." "And you can't abandon your mother," I said. "So you must decide what silence you can live with." "Silence. You can keep the silence that lets someone else write your name," I said, "or the silence that keeps your name in your own handwriting. You will live with whichever you choose." He sagged into a folding chair. "Lauren says this is love." "Love doesn't need a notary," I answered. "Love can stand in a room without papers and still be seen." The choir began a hymn, words about refuge and wings. Mike stared at the carpet. "I thought marriage would make life bigger," he whispered. "Instead, it's a funnel." One word left. "What word?" "Yes." Helen leaned forward. "Your hands have been shaking since the wedding. Bodies tell the truth when mouths won't." "Silence does too." He barked a small, bitter laugh. "Do you want me to abandon her?" "I want you to stop abandoning yourself," I said. "If you believe I'm confused, say it. If you believe I'm clear, stand there. But don't call fear peace." His eyes glistened. "I hate this. I know. Hating a storm doesn't move it. But you choose which house to stand in while it passes." For a heartbeat, he looked like the boy who once handed me dandelions with muddy hands. Then the boy vanished, replaced by a man crumbling. Helen rose and set a hand on his shoulder. When Sunday comes, she said softly, "You'll speak even if you say nothing. People always do." Tears broke loose. At first, he fought them embarrassed. Then he let go. The church absorbed his grief as if it had been built for this very moment. I brushed one tear from my sleeve and let him cry. "I can't decide," he gasped. "You already are," I said gently. "Every hour you wait is a vote you'll remember." He nodded miserably. The hymn ended, leaving an echo that fluttered in the vent like a trapped bird. "I'm afraid," he whispered. "So am I admitted. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's telling the truth with your own name." He stood shakily taller by a fraction, as though a line had been redrawn in him. "If I speak, I could lose her. If you don't, I said you'll lose yourself, and you will still lose me." We stood in silence, rain feathering the window. His phone buzzed against the chair, shrill in the hush. He glanced down, color draining from his face. Slowly, he turned the screen toward us. "Lauren texts. Sunday, everyone will know who you really are." The church hall overflowed with people, and they called me to the front like a case study in frailty. Chairs scraped across linoleum, children, hushed hymnals closed. Light fell in hard stripes through high windows, and I felt the eyes measuring me, my posture, my stillness. It was the wedding again, only this time flowers were replaced by faces, each one deciding what to believe. Evelyn stepped to the podium, palms raised in polished concern. "We love Margaret," she said sweetly. "We admire her thrift, her independence. But love must be honest." Her sigh carried across the rows. "There have been lapses, forgetfulness, confusion. It is hard to admit." She looked at me as if pity were mercy. Lauren glided forward, radiant, rehearsed. "This isn't about control," she assured. "It's about protecting Margaret from predators, honoring her medical wishes. She raised my husband. I only want her safe." Her smile lingered on the words. "My husband like a hook," then carefully. "There are significant assets. That can attract the wrong attention." The room stiffened. Whispers slid between pews. Suspicion rippled the way shadows move over water. The memory of my face erased from the wedding album burned behind my eyes. Thomas approached last papers in hand, the leash of authority. "We filed for emergency guardianship this morning," he announced. "Narrow temporary only for finances and medical care. We've seen diminished capacity, and court intervention will ensure stability." His tone was clean, practiced, final. Gasps, murmurs, a cough to break tension. Some heads nodded, some shook. Ruth's jaw locked, Bernice's eyes narrowed. Althea scribbled sharp lines in her notebook. Helen leaned forward, her gaze fastening me to my chair like a nail. Evelyn dabbed an invisible tear. It is so hard to speak these truths, but necessary. Lauren reclaimed the microphone, voice bright as glass. "We asked Margaret to sign simple papers. She refused. We offered a family meeting. She refused. We cannot sit idle while she risks herself." In the back row, someone whispered stubborn, and another whispered good for her. The two judgments braided until I couldn't tell which one the hall believed. My pulse ticked steady against the binder at my feet. Evelyn tilted her head toward me. "Margaret, dear, would you like to speak?" The word dear cut like lace over a bruise. She didn't hand me the microphone. She only smiled. I rose slowly. My knees did not tremble. "Not yet," I said. My voice was low, forcing the room to lean in. That lean was the first scrap of dignity returned. Lauren covered the pause with practiced brightness. This is family business, yes, but families are part of communities. Communities protect their elders. The phrase wrapped itself around the hall like a net, soft and dangerous. The air thinned. Even the coffee urn stilled. Near the door, Mike stood, pale, rigid hands locked at his sides. He hadn't chosen yet, but he had come. Thomas raised his papers high. "This is simple," he thundered. "For her safety, we demand emergency guardianship." The words slammed into the rafters, rolling over the crowd. Relief crossed some faces, doubt others. Shame brushed close, but I would not let it settle. The binder at my feet was weight and weapon, both. Ruth half stood ready to object, but Bernice tugged her back eyes on Richard. Althea underlined something twice. Helen gave me the smallest nod hold. Thomas lowered his papers, satisfied by the sound of his own sentence. Evelyn's hand brushed Lauren's sleeve, a private coronation. Then Richard rose, unhurried, certain. He carried no microphone, only the slim folder under his arm. He stood until the silence bent toward him, until the difference between performance and presence was visible to all. Richard Rice's court is not here today, but the truth is. Richard opened the green binder, each page landing like a hammer blow. The church hall hadn't emptied. It had crystallized. Same rows, same faces, the same sun sliding down stained glass, but the air was different, expectant, brittle. I could hear a child's whisper, a spoon touching a paper cup, the tiny sounds of people preparing to be convinced. Lauren's hand clamped Mike's forearm. Evelyn's pearls didn't move, but her throat did. Thomas stood square to the room as if a judge might drop from the rafters. Richard didn't reach for the microphone. He let paper speak. First he said, calm as a plumb line the bank. A printout lifted subject line bright enough to catch the front row, beneficiary change request denied. Time stamped. Branch initials. He laid it flat so everyone could see the red stamp. A ripple passed through the hall like wind crossing wheat. He held up the next page, a photocopied form with a signature as sure as a boot print. Submitted through Mr. Blake's office, Richard said, eyes on Thomas. Your login, your IP, acting without authority. Thomas opened his mouth and closed it again. The room leaned as if it might hear the excuse before he found it. Second capacity. Richard produced a single page embossed with my clinic's seal. Letter from Dr. Harris, dated this week. Patient demonstrates capacity to manage financial and medical affairs independently. HEPA release on file. He set the release beside it like a twin blade. There is no medical basis for guardianship, only ambition. Evelyn's smile faltered. Lauren's fingers went bloodless on Mike's sleeve. I felt Edward's steadiness in my bones, the quiet that outlasts storms. Richard turned to me and stepped back. I walked forward. My hands didn't tremble. I lifted the wedding album. The gloss caught the light and wavered. This, I said, opening to a full-page spread where roses built a wall is how erasure looks when it wears perfume. I flipped, a shoulder blocking my face. I flipped again, a column swallowing me whole. Gasps moved like minnows through the rows. I took out a printed email and read, voice steady. Per Lauren's instructions, proceed with layout as attached. I let the page lower. Erase a mother from the pictures and then call it love. Lauren tried a smile that showed every seam. We wanted a clean aesthetic and a clean beneficiary list, Richard asked, laying the bank denial beside the album. He placed our evidence log on top dates, places, witnesses. Silence isn't consent. It's strategy. Thomas tugged his tie. Even with a letter, capacity fluctuates. Emergency measures require evidence, not theater, Richard answered. He slid out the audit trail login's keystrokes, timestamps, ladders neat enough to climb. This isn't care, it's access. A hush held. You could hear fabric settle. Ruth's jaw was iron. Bernice's eyes were bright as pins. Althea underlined something twice. Helen's chin lifted a fraction, hold not yet. I closed the album. The click was small and final. I will not sign away what I can still count. My voice carried without effort. And I will not call a leash a lifeline. Lauren wavered. Margaret, we only. You only moved first, I said. The bank told me so. From the aisle, Mike stood. The scrape of his chair cut the room in two. His face was pale, his hands open, and for an instant he looked like my boy with a hurt he didn't know how to name. He turned from Lauren to me and found a place where his voice could stand. I choose my mother. The sound climbed the rafters and shook loose a dozen small noises. Gasps, a dropped pen, someone's soft, "Oh Lord." Evelyn clutched air. Thomas's shoulders fell a half-inch, and in that small collapse, the petition in his hand turned back into paper. I didn't reach for Mike, and he didn't reach for me. We held the space, honest. Richard faced the room again, voice still level. The trust's terms are irrevocable. Distributions are protected. No power of attorney can breach physician triggers. No emergency petition can conjure incapacity from rumor. He set the capacity letter on the stack, then the denial, then the album email, each page a rung. You wanted public. Here it is, public and plain. Evelyn drew herself up, pearls rattling faintly. This family deserves Richard's palm, closed the binder with a single clean report. The trust is ironclad. This ends today. The sentence fell like stone into water and kept ringing long after the sound was gone. I felt the hall tilt again, away from pity, toward clarity. Faces rearranged themselves, some ashamed, some relieved, some simply awake. I stood where the light from the glass lay across the floor like a stripe, and for the first time since the wedding, I occupied my own outline. Edward would have nodded once the way he did when offense finally held true. Mike's shoulders squared beside me. Lauren's smile slid off its frame, and in the quiet that followed my silence, did what it was built to do. It made room for proof, for breath, for an ending I could live with. For the first time, every eye was on me, not as an afterthought, but as the woman at the center. The silence in the church hall wasn't hostile anymore. It was weight recognition. Faces turned not toward Evelyn's polished pearls or Lauren's curated smile, but toward me. The same hall where they had tried to frame me as frail now shimmered with a different truth. I stood upright. Binder still warm in my hands, the pages heavy with proof. Ruth leaned forward, her voice breaking the quiet. We see you, Margaret. We all do. Murmurs rose, not whispers of doubt, but the kind of agreement that gathers like a tide. Bernice tapped her cane on the floor, a signal of solidarity. Althea's lips pressed into a smile that held no pity, only respect. Evelyn faltered first. The pearls she had worn like armor slipped beneath her collarbone as she hunched. Lauren tried to recover her words, brittle. We just wanted, but her sentence frayed as the congregation shook their heads. Their social capital, built on pretense, dissolved in that shared room of witnesses. Richard closed the binder, but the sound no longer carried menace. It was a seal, a finality. This matter is finished, he said. No one argued. Thomas avoided every eye, the briefcase at his feet, suddenly a burden he wanted gone. Mike stood again, but this time his face wasn't pale with fear. It was flushed with shame. He turned toward me, hands trembling like they had on my porch, but his voice steadier now. Mom, I should have believed you sooner. I let their voices drown yours, and I let silence become cowardice. His eyes brimmed, unguarded. I promise I'll do better. I'll stand with you, not against you. I didn't move to embrace him. Words meant more than gestures in moments like these. Then let your silence from now on be a choice for truth, not an excuse for fear. His nod was small, but it was real. The church began to empty groups, whispering about what they had witnessed. Some touched my arm as they passed, small affirmations that dignity once restored glowed brighter because it had been dimmed. Helen lingered, last placing a hand on mine. They tried to erase you, she said softly, but now no one can forget what they saw. By evening, I was home. The house smelled faintly of roses from the garden outside, blossoms Edward once planted. I set the binder on the table, then lifted his old plaid shirt from the closet. It still held the faint scent of cedar. Draping it over the chair, I felt the room settle as though he'd just stepped out for a moment. On the mantel, his photograph caught the fading light. I whispered, "A locked door is still hospitality on my terms." For years, others had barged into my silence, painting it as weakness. Tonight, it was a threshold I owned. In the kitchen, I brewed 2 cups of tea, steam curling in the lamplight. I carried them back to the table and set one before Edward's picture. The cup clinked against the saucer, a sound of peace earned. Outside, the roses swayed against the window, no longer hiding me, but framing me. Justice had not come quickly, but it had come rooted in silence, sealed in paper, watered in patience. And as I sat across from Edward's image, the truth was simple. Justice delayed was not justice denied. I stood through betrayal, humiliation, and the attempt to erase me. Yet silence became my shield, and truth my sword. Now I turn to you. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts, your advice, your lessons. I want to hear from those who have faced erasure or fought quietly for dignity. Let my journey remind you, never let others define your worth. Paperwork, proof, and patience can become weapons of justice. Please leave your comments below, support, critique, or wisdom, because every voice strengthens the fight against being made invisible.